everyone, I'm Sal, co-creator of Salt and Pepper Productions, and I'm back with another Danganronpa video. Monaca Towa was the primary antagonist of Danganronpa, another episode, Ultra Despair Girls. She didn't die at the end of that game, so a lot of fans believed she would be the main villain in Danganronpa 3, The End of Hope's Peak Academy. Some suspected that Mieya Gekigahara was actually Monaka in disguise. When Monaka appeared at the very end of Future Arc Episode 4, this seemed to confirm all the theories that were floating around. Enter Future Arc Episode 7. We learn that Monaka isn't the one who orchestrated the Future Foundation killing game. On top of that, we learn that she lost interest in the ongoing battle between hope and despair. She wants to forget all about it. At the end of the episode, Monaka announces that she's going to leave Earth and live in outer space. She blasts off without another word. When this episode aired in 2016, I thought it was the weakest one in the entire show, and I wasn't alone. Many fans hated how the anime wrapped up Monaka's story. They thought her decision to leave Earth and abandon the hope versus despair conflict was very sudden and lazy. It's been over 5 years since the anime's release. I still don't think this episode is amazing, but I do have a slightly new take on Monaka's story arc. In this video, I'll explain this new take by speculating how and why Monaka made the decision she made in the show. To understand Monaka's departure in the anime, we need to revisit the game that introduced her. Another episode, Ultra Despair Girls, takes place in a city that's run by a powerful IT corporation called Towa Group. Tokuichi Towa was the head of the company prior to his death. Throughout the game, Komaru Naegi and Toku Fukawa interact with Tokuichi's son, Haiji Towa. We eventually learn that Monaka, the shadow leader of the Warriors of Hope, is Haiji's younger sister. She was also the chief executive of Towa Group's robotics branch. At the story's climax, we learn that Towa Group was the company that supplied the Monokuma units Junko Enoshima used to start the tragedy. At the same time, they created weapons and other forms of technology to help people fight off the Monokumas. Towa Group profited off the hope versus despair conflict. In Chapter 3 of the game, there's a scene that foreshadows this big reveal. After a pack of Monokumas ambush the adults' hideout, Haiji immediately blames Komaru and Toko. He also accuses them of acting as spies for the Warriors of Hope. When Toko tries to refute his accusation, Haiji recites an old folktale where a war rages between birds and beasts. In the story, a two-faced bat participates in the war, acting as an ally to both parties, but in the end, the bat ends up alone. When we reach the end of the game, we have a new understanding of the previous scene. We realize that Haiji was projecting. He was accusing Komaru and Toko of something that he and his family were guilty of. To put it simply, the ultimate despair is the beast, the rest of the world is the bird, and Towa Group is the bat, playing both sides. In the beginning, Monaca acted alone. She collaborated with Junko without her family's knowledge. When Tokuichi discovered why Monaca was building the Monokumas, when he discovered what the machines were actually being used for, he tried to stop her. In response, Monaca made a clever proposition. She suggested that Towa Group start building and distributing weapons that can counteract the Monokumas. Tokuichi was thrilled to be making extra money, and he loved how everyone hailed him and his company as heroes. He became an avid supporter of Junko and the tragedy. After Junko died, the Future Foundation's efforts improved and the Ultimate Despair began to lose influence. Feeling that he couldn't profit off the situation anymore, Tokuichi decided to tap out. He decided to abandon the Hope versus Despair conflict. What does this have to do with Monaka's departure in Future Arc Episode 7? Why is any of this relevant? Well, I believe Monaka's story arc parallels what happened to the bat in the folktale and what happened to her father in real life. Monaka was one of Junko's most devout followers. She originally caused chaos for despair's sake. She developed the Monokuma units to help fuel the tragedy. After Junko died, Monaca did everything in her power to make sure Junko's legacy continued. Every action she took was to please Junko. Very simple, very straightforward. After the events of another episode, Ultra Despair Girls, Monaca continued to wreak havoc in Towa City, but this time she was doing it under Nagito Kamaida's guidance and supervision. Nagito has a strange take on hope and despair. He always pursues hope in a roundabout way. He's willing to cause pain and suffering because he believes the people around him have the strength to overcome it. Nagito helped Monaca become Junko's successor because he believed the despair she would cause could be used to create hope. Monaca was still causing chaos, but because she was being influenced by Nagito, it was for hope's sake rather than for despair's sake. This new partnership marked the beginning of the end for Monaca. When Nagito turned Monaca into Junko's successor, he complicated her role. Fighting for hope in such a roundabout way took a toll on Monaca. The immediate despair she caused no longer brought her satisfaction. To her, the hope versus despair conflict was draining, as were Nagito and his philosophy. As time passed, Monaka's passion for the fight ran its course. By the time we get to the future arc, she's simply playing a part, going through the motions, doing what one would expect from Junko's successor. Tokuichi decided to quit after Junko died. He abandoned the fight between hope and despair because it stopped bringing in money. When he told Monaca it was over, she called him a fickle, wishy-washy adult. When Monaca says Nagito turned me into an adult, she's acknowledging that her father was right to quit when he did. Junko was the person who viewed Monaca as a useful asset. She's the one who introduced Monaca to the hope versus despair conflict. She's the one Monaca was trying so hard to please. Junko's long gone now, so what's the point of it all? Monaca doesn't feel wanted or needed, despite everything Nagito has told her. Maybe she should just tap out. Maybe she should leave everyone and everything behind. Before finalizing her decision, Monaca decides that she wants to meet Makoto Naegi. She wants to see the ultimate hope, the one who defeated Junko, up close. She kills and impersonates one of Future Foundation's branch leaders so she can attend Makoto's trial at the secret base. When the Future Foundation killing game starts, she becomes a temporary ally to Makoto and his friends. She helps them escape from the other members, and she fights on their behalf. She fights on the side of hope in a more direct way. By the time we get to Future Arc Episode 7, Monaca had finalized her decision to leave. After witnessing and participating in both sides of the issue, after seeing how others have been affected by everything, she lost the motivation to go on and dropped the successor act in front of Komaru and Toko. Monaka's dialogue in this scene is very interesting to me. I figure if we fight, I'll lose. Even if I fight, hope always ultimately wins. But I don't know whose hope it'll be. So, I'm done. The first half of this line feels very reminiscent of Nagito. After all, if despair is just a means to create hope, as Nagito believes, hope will win in the end. It's inevitable. In the second half of this line, she's admitting that she's lost sight of which team she's fighting for. She doesn't know who will benefit from her efforts. This is why she thinks the hope versus despair conflict is too complicated. Hope and despair mean different things to different people. Trying to keep up with everything and play both sides has burnt her out. Monaca has been an active participant in the hope versus despair conflict since the very beginning. She was a key player in starting the tragedy. After participating in both sides of the issue, she finally lost her drive. Much like her father and her brother, Monaca doesn't care about hope and despair anymore. In Haiji's folktale, the bat stopped fighting because it couldn't get close to either side. After Junko died, Tokuichi stopped fighting because he could no longer profit off his dual alliance. In Future Arc Episode 7, Monaca stopped fighting because the hope versus despair conflict became too much for her. Plus, the person she actually wanted to fight for is dead. Monaca wants to completely remove herself from the hope versus despair conflict. The entire world has been affected by this conflict, so the only way to escape from it is to leave Earth behind. And that's exactly what she does. Monaca leaves Earth, with no intention of coming back. Much like the bat in Haiji's folktale, Monaca is all alone. Thank you for watching the video. So what do you think of this theory/analysis? What are your thoughts on Monaka's departure? What are your thoughts on Towa Group and the Bat folktale? Do you agree with anything I had to say? Do you disagree with anything I had to say? Let us know in the comments below. Don't be afraid to like and subscribe. Check out our other videos if you haven't already. Be sure to share this video, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Bye!